Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, my next guest joins us to talk about the keys to success. He's dedicated his time in helping students in the Bronx, as well as helping to find resources, including money, to help schools in the surrounding area. Now, with his 18 years in the New York City school system, he's about to release his long-anticipated book. Mr. Luis Torres, more popularly known as the Bronx Principal, is joining me next on Perspectives with yours truly, Daren.
What's on your mind? Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to Perspectives. Daren Hyman, as we said, and I'm glad to have you sharing with us. As always, you watch Perspectives every week here on Bronx Nets Channel 67. Now, if you want to stay connected to us, there's some ways that you can do it. You can check us out on social media. Our TV page is BronxNet TV. If you're looking to reach me personally, Facebook, that's Daren C. Jaime. And then we've also got Instagram and Twitter, DC Jaime 23. There you can find some information as well as some inspiration as well. And listen, we do want to stay connected. Well, coming up on today's show, I want to let you know my guest. He's been the president of the New York City Elementary Schools Principal Association. Now, he's been a principal in New York City for over 18 years. After serving in the U.S. Navy for 10 years, he earned a bachelor's degree in psychology from City College, a master's degree in education from Mercy College, and an advanced degree in administration from Hunter College. He then entered the New York City Leadership Academy, after which he was given the responsibility of Community School 55 in the lowest performing Claremont section of the Bronx. Torres has actually turned, his team has turned CS 55, that was once the lowest performing school in New York City, into a model school. He's also raised millions of dollars for CS 55 and surrounding schools. And we're pleased to have none other than the principal himself, Luis Torres, being with us and sharing with us here on Perspectives. And Principal Torres, glad to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Well, listen, I appreciate you. And first of all, I want to commend you on the work that you're doing as a principal, really doing some boots on the ground work in the poorest congressional district in the United States. And when you look at the journey so far for you, talk to me about what it's been like to go from where you are, where you've been to where you are. It's been a long journey.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I grew up in a very challenging community in the 70s and 80s. It was Soundview section during the crack epidemic. And, you know, growing up in that area, you know, education was a priority for my family. So my mom and my dad made sure I went to school. But sadly, when I got to high school, my school counselor, back then they called them school counselors, told me I would not be successful in college, that I should find something else to do. So I wound up joining the military, and I went away to the U.S. Navy during Desert Storm. And then I came back from the Navy to prove the guidance counselor wrong, and I wound up earning 4 college degrees. And one of the degrees was an associate's in science from Hostos, which I know you didn't mention, but I have 4 degrees at this point to prove that guidance counselor wrong.
I left one out, man. I promise. It wasn't intentional, but that's awesome. And when we talk about the 4 degrees, you made education a priority in your life. I mean, was it the fact that somebody said that you couldn't make it that was that inspiration, that spark?
Yeah, she was I always tell people she's my greatest motivational speaker, right? She encouraged me to dig deep, you know, and sadly, you know, she did it with the wrong intentions, but at the end of the day, it benefited me in the long run, and it inspired me to go back into education so that I can ensure that what happened to me doesn't happen to no other young men from the Bronx.
Yeah. I want to talk for a minute for somebody who doesn't know. As I said, if you're just joining us, he is the principal of CS 55, and that is in the Claremont section of the Bronx, where really it's a story that needs to be told nationwide of the transformation of this school to where it is today. Let's talk about for a moment where you found the school. How was it when you first got there?
Yeah, when I first got here, it was very scary because you had overage children sitting in classrooms with elementary school children. So you had 12-year-olds sitting in classrooms with 8, 9-year-olds, and it was just a really bad situation. The principal that came before me did very good to try to get it on the right track. And usually what happens is they get promoted. So she got promoted into a higher position, and then I inherited the school. But there was a lot of challenges here. One time the school was considered one of the most dangerous in the city, even though it was an elementary school. So when I took it over, there was a lot of need in the community that was not being addressed by the school. So I needed to quickly, match the needs of the community with what the school was providing, and I was able to fill those gaps over the years.
You had a huge turnaround, but as you said, when you found that school, educationally challenging, you had the whole community challenge of people not even wanting to go to that school simply because of what was going on around the school and in the school. And so the culture had to shift. And I think that so many times we don't spend time talking about how a person is able to navigate and shift that culture. What was it for you that helped you to shift that culture so that way you can be at the place you are today?
Yeah, so I grew up with a father that was a big community leader. So I saw how important involving the community in everything you do was. So my father, he ran 2 buildings in Soundview. They were the only 2 drug-free buildings because he involved the community in everything he did. So as a young man, I got to see that with my father. And then when I took over my school, what people need to understand is that for many families, education is a 6th priority. Food, shelter, safety, health, and access to technology come before education. So as a leader that understands that, I understand that you have to address those 5 basic needs before we can educate our children. So immediately that was my focus, was like, how do I address those 5 needs so that my children can then focus on their education? And the school needed some resources, and I was able to get that over the years. We've had almost $28 million invested in the school over the last 7, 8 years.
And as we look at the investment has certainly paid off. I mean, we've got students who are doing better than ever before. You got to have buy-in from the community. You have to have buy-in from the parents, but then you also have to buy-in from staff. I know there had to be a change of the culture of the staff. How were you able to really get your place staff-wise to be able to adopt this vision for transformation?
Yeah, is allowing the staff to also understand that it's not just about educating the child. It's also about doing all those extra things. When you become a teacher in our school, you're not coming here just to focus on literacy and mathematics. You're coming here to focus on the whole child, the whole community, and how can you provide supports so that your children can be successful. And that culture, it takes a lot of time to develop it. I mean, having 18 years in one building, you kind of are able to establish it, but it's also bringing in resources and showing your staff that what you talk about is a reality. It's not just, you talking about the 6 priorities and not bringing in the resources. In our school, I have a hospital in the building. I have farms. I have right now a soccer stadium being built, an actual soccer stadium being built in the schoolyard. I partner with organizations to bring aeroponic farms to the building. So it's also, getting your staff to see that you're not just talking the talk, you're actually going to do the work.
It's an amazing story. I mean, anybody who knows the history of transformation that's going on in the Claremont section of the Bronx, right with you, will testify that this is an amazing story that I think many people need to be able to know about. And as we talk about the story, let's talk about you for a second. You're a fighter, and that's the best way I like to put it. You're a fighter, but I know that part of that fighting came from, listen, you had a strict military background here for a minute, huh? Spend some time. How much did the military in your beginning, and thank you for your service, how much did that play a part in being the disciplinarian and the passionate person that you are today?
Yeah, it had a great impact on me because first off, the fact that I was in the military was inequity in itself, right? I was pretty much directed in that way, even though I really didn't want to join the military. I was kind of steered that way by someone who didn't look like me or didn't come from the community, right? So that changed my mindset around equity, right, growing up. And that was my first experience with racism, right? Like I didn't realize it till while I was in the military, lying in my bunk, and there's bombs going off over my head, right? Mm-hmm. And this was during training, and luckily I didn't even go overseas, but because by the time it was time for me to go, the war was over. We literally bombed Iraq, and then they sent us back home. But it changed my perspective about life. You realize that life is short. People say it, but I actually experienced it because I was in a life or death situation. And I realized that, I have a lot more to offer and I have a purpose in life. And my purpose in life is to come back to educate as many youth as possible so that they can be who they want to be, not what people want them to be. And that's been my mission in life, is like, helping children and people reach their potential. Because not only the children that I work with, I also work with the parents and the community to help people to reach their potential.
The potential is there. We see it sometimes in kids that other people would pass over. For yourself, having the opportunity to have somebody speak into your life in a negative kind of way, the way that you're talking about right now, that got you to where you are today. Talk to me about how that's even impacted you and how you deal with kids with potential. Because when you first come, they're green, they're diamonds in the rough. Sometimes they're really rough cut. But you got to be able to say, listen, I see something, and not only am I going to see something, I'm going to see you through. And this is what you do, man. You see people, then you're able to help see them through.
Yeah, I'm a believer that every child is gifted and talented. If I was given a piano as a child, who knows? I would have probably been a pianist, right? I could have been, the next Mozart or whatever, But I never had access to a piano. For me, everything's about giving access and allowing our children to be able to express themselves freely and not be controlled by the limitations of not having resources. So at our school, for example, on Saturdays, the children can compete in archery, fencing, soccer, tennis, capoeira dancing, flamenco dancing. They learn African languages. They learn Spanish at our school. So we expose our children to a wealth of experiences. Even we have flag football and soccer, so that our children can participate in those things that my own children can participate in. Because at the end of the day, that access can lead to scholarships, access to high performing high schools and college, and not everybody's going to go to college, because that's another thing that I want to make very clear. Not everybody's going to go to college. When I was going to high school, remember, we had CTL classes, technical classes, where you can become a mechanic if you wanted to become a mechanic, or you can become a cook if you wanted to. So I want to give our children every opportunity, every advantage that they can have to be productive citizens, as well as be able to compete for those scholarships that some communities control, right? So whatever communities have strong sports and arts programs control a lot of the scholarships to the high schools and the colleges.
All right. For you, exposure is critical, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to see kids get exposed. The more exposure they have, the better they have the opportunity for a successful outcome for yourself. Your exposure early on to the arts was a real huge difference maker for you. But many times when we look at schools, it's the first line of budget cuts. The government will cut it. State education will cut it. Classrooms are cut. The arts. Talk to me about the arts and what it meant to you, and because I know you even went as far as TED Talk in this area.
Yeah, I mean, I had a TED Talk called, it talked about how the arts, not having access to the arts almost killed me. So I'm very passionate about that. But what I learned about working in the system over the last 18 years is that there are structures within the system to keep schools failing. When a school is failing, they receive a lot of extra funding from the state. Once that school starts to show success, that funding is then taken away. Why is that funding taken away? Because, everything that made you successful then disappears. So as a school leader, I realized that I can't be dependent on state funding to be successful, because as soon as I become successful, it gets taken away. So what I've done is I partner with so many different organizations to make sure that the arts and sports don't ever get cut, because I'm not dependent on state funding to provide those services. I get grants, I have partnerships, and most of my arts and sports programs are funded by partnerships and outside private organizations that I work with. Because if I show too much success, that money goes away, and then the sports and arts are cut. But in the eyes of the world and society, sports and arts are not considered a primary subject or important subjects.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm a product of sports, and if I didn't have sports, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today. I think they gave me a successful outlet, found a coach, had some discipline. I gotta give a shout out to Big Al E4, just passed away. 135th Street, Harlem, taught us, things I'm still using today. Sports was, basketball was key and critical. But I want to talk about your book, because you got a book that's out. It's coming out, but I gotta take a break. So let me do that. Take the break first. Come back and talk more about the book as we continue here on Perspectives. Don't go anywhere. Be back with Principal Torres in a minute.
Moms and dads, what you have achieved here today is going to help us and our futures. It is why we are coming up on stage to collect your diplomas.
It's true.
Mom, we love you always.
Everything I do.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
And we're back here on Perspectives. And if you don't know him, you will know him, because guess what? He is Principal Torres, making a huge impact in the lives of people. CS 55 right there in the Claremont section of the Bronx. The poorest congressional district is one of the greatest stories of turnaround schools in the nation. And not only is it a turnaround school it's getting nationwide attention, it's a school that really has transformed the lives of the kids, even instructors, and most of all, the community, which is a hard thing to do. And so, Principal Torres, I want to get to you for a moment because in this work, you've been, like, let's see, my favorite term is boots on the ground. For people who've got boots on the ground, you got boots on the ground with this literally. And now you've taken it to another level because in addition to serving as principal, you're also now an author that is serving it up to give people an understanding. You got a book coming out, The 6 Priorities. I want you to tell us a little bit about the book and what made you decide to write this.
Yeah, I decided to write this book because, for a long time I've been providing support to a lot of schools over the, I would say, 15 to 18 years that I've been a principal. I've been able to secure over $50 million in funding for not only my school, but schools around in the community. And people are always looking at me and saying, Torres, how do you get all these resources? How do you partner with the Yankees? How do you get the soccer stadium built? How are you getting the funding for the Windows of Hip Hop music studio in the basement? How are you getting all this work done? Why do you get so much investment? So I said, you know what? I'm going to create a book because I want to make sure that when people ask that question, they can go somewhere and get a resource in their hands that is going to be something that they can pick up and literally teach them how to do what I do. And that's pretty much hustle and beg for resources.
And now, when you talk about the 6 priorities, I don't want to sell the whole book. I mean, give away the whole book, but we want to make sure the book sells. So tell us a little bit about what you can tell us when it comes to these 6 priorities.
Yeah, so, for a lot of our families, like I said earlier, education is a 6th priority. You have to address food, safety, shelter, health, and access to technology before you can get to educating the children. So what the book does is it pretty much provides you firsthand resources and a plan on how to address those 5 other basic needs. So the first chapter is around food. How do we address food as an issue in our school community so that our children can then focus on education? And one of the things I recently said was, if you don't feed the children, they'll eat the teachers, right? Because a child that's hungry is not going to focus in your classroom, and they're going to destroy your lesson. You're not going to be able to teach because that child that's sitting there is hungry. And if you don't address that in your community and you multiply that over a good number of children, you have a school that is struggling, not because the children can't perform, but because the children are hungry. Feed the children, feed your community. So then you go, from food, and then you go into safety, where you talk about, the importance of partnering with the police department, having cameras around the schools, and investing in those things that make schools safe for our children, families, and community. So it's basically, a book where you can pretty much, if you have an organization, pick up this book, and I will teach you how to address those 5 basic needs so that you can focus on education. And then when you get to education, I go into why education needs to have a purpose.
I want to take a moment while we're talking about, these 6 priorities. Where does government fit in all of this? Because when we talk about government, you say you don't really rely on them for a lot of things, but yet and still they should be responsible for certain things. Talk to me about state and federal government, city government. Where do you think they really fit in your equation?
Yeah, to me, some of my greatest partners are the elected officials. When I talk about funding, I'm talking about state funding that is not the elected officials. The elected officials, like the assembly people, the city council people, the borough presidents, have to become your best friends in this work. If not, you're gonna struggle to get those resources you need. So I built a strong relationship early on with Michael Blake when he was assemblyman. Then it became Vanessa Gibson as a city councilwoman. And then it was Chantel Jackson, Althea Stevens, now Vanessa's borough president. You have to build these relationships because they have access to resources that you need to be able to tap into. So one of the things I teach in the book is that relationship with the elected officials and how important it is. And knowing who your elected officials are. It's so sad that, there are school leaders out there that don't even know who their elected officials are. And they're probably one of the most important people you need to know in order to get the resources you need for your schools.
Yeah. And elected officials are very important. I think they help out tremendously in making the voice heard. Talk to me about what advice do you give to parents nowadays? Because every parent doesn't get the luxury of being at CS 55. There's some that are dealing with schools that don't have adequate resources, teachers that may not be as vested in the lives of students. What advice do you give to parents these days about helping their kids be able to have a successful future?
Yeah, so one of the things I do is I not only educate the whole child, I educate the whole community. So I involve my community in a lot of the work I do here in the school, from the food pantries that I do on Saturdays to meetings and workshops I do virtually with parents, to just involving them in the process. So I would say to a parent, get involved. If you want to have an impact in your child's school, don't show up to the school just to complain. Go to the school and figure out ways to make the school better. A lot of my great ideas, a lot of the things that I've done over the years, it's been a parent who has provided me that feedback. So I would say to parents, we can complain about everything, but if you don't get involved, the change never happens. So getting more parents involved in the school is very important. And, parents have to take ownership too of some of the work. Making sure your child is on time and in school every day is very important. For me as an elementary school, my students' attendance is a parent attendance rate, right? So just, taking ownership of your children, and investing in them and working collaboratively with the school is very instrumental in making sure that our children are successful. And I always tell people, it really doesn't matter what school your child goes to, as long as you're invested and you work with the school and you make sure that your child is doing what they need to do, they will be successful. I went to some of the most challenging schools as a young man, and because my parents were strong on me and making sure I was focused on my education, I was still able to be successful. And, those were very challenging schools.
Yeah. Well, Principal Torres, we got to leave it there. We definitely put the information out so that way people can be able to get a hold of the book, get connected with you. I want to thank you, first of all, again, for your service to our country and what you've done, and then also for your service now to the community and how you've been a great blessing and a great advocate for so many of our young people and helping them to really have exposure to the future. And thank you so much for being with us.
This is like coming home. I love BronxNet. I've done some work with BronxNet, and this is like coming home. So I appreciate BronxNet for everything you do for me.
Hey, man, thank you. And listen, we're going to get you back, and certainly glad to have you. Principal Luis Torres here with us here on Perspectives. Listen, I'm Daren. I want to tell you thank you for watching the show. Until the next time we meet, stay safe, share your perspective with somebody else, because you just don't know. It might make a difference in somebody else's life. Take care.